The notification sound from my phone startled me as I was arranging fresh chrysanthemums in my favorite crystal vase, the one Harold had given me for our 40th wedding anniversary. At 73, I still wasn't used to all the beeps and buzzes that came from the little device my daughter insisted I carry everywhere. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and squinted at the screen, trying to make sense of the message from my grandson Tyler. It was a link to something called TikTok with a laughing emoji and the words, "Grandma Rose, you have to see this old lady trying to dance. So cringe, but hilarious." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I had no idea what TikTok was, but Tyler's message stung more than I cared to admit. At 17, my grandson had become increasingly dismissive of anything that didn't involve a screen or happen at lightning speed. Gone were the days when he'd spend entire afternoons in my kitchen, helping me bake cookies and telling me about his dreams. Now our conversations consisted mainly of him rolling his eyes at my questions and making jokes I didn't understand. I set the phone aside and continued arranging the flowers, trying to push away the hurt that had settled in my chest like a stone. This wasn't the first time Tyler had made me feel ancient and out of touch, but something about being sent a video to mock someone my age felt particularly cruel. I'd raised that boy during the summers when his parents worked long hours, taught him to ride his first bicycle in my driveway, and bandaged countless scraped knees on my front porch steps. Now, I was apparently nothing more than entertainment for him and his friends. The house felt too quiet after that. Harold had been gone for 3 years now, and my daughter Rebecca lived 2 states away with her busy career in marketing. Tyler lived just 20 minutes from me, but he might as well have been on another planet for all the meaningful connection we had these days. I found myself wandering through rooms filled with memories, past photo albums he never wanted to look through, and recipe cards he claimed were too much work compared to ordering takeout. That evening, I called my neighbor Margaret, hoping for some perspective. Margaret was 75 and had been my closest friend since we'd both moved to Millbrook Heights 37 years ago. She answered on the first ring, as always. "Rose, perfect timing. I just finished watching the most ridiculous thing on my granddaughter's Instagram. These young people and their obsession with documenting every sandwich they eat." Margaret's voice carried the same bewilderment I felt about the digital world our grandchildren inhabited. "Tyler sent me something today that hurt my feelings," I admitted, settling into Harold's old recliner. "A video making fun of older people trying to use something called TikTok. He thought it was hilarious that someone my age would even attempt it." Margaret made a disapproving sound. "That boy needs a reality check. Remember when he was 12 and couldn't figure out how to use my rotary phone? You patiently showed him 3 times. Now he's too good to show you the same courtesy with his gadgets." We talked for another hour, sharing stories about how different things had been when we were raising our children, how respect for elders used to mean something. But after I hung up, the loneliness crept back in. I looked at my phone again, that TikTok link still glowing on the screen like a tiny mockery of everything I didn't understand about the modern world. The next morning brought an unexpected visit from Tyler. I was surprised to see him at my front door at 10 in the morning, considering he usually slept until noon during his summer break from high school. He looked fidgety, shifting his weight from one foot to another, his phone clutched in his hand like a lifeline. "Hey, Grandma Rose," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Mom said I should come check on you since I was in the neighborhood." "Would you like some breakfast? I just made fresh blueberry muffins." "Nah, I'm not really hungry." He flopped onto my living room couch, immediately pulling out his phone. "I just wanted to show you something really quick, and then I gotta meet my friends at the mall." I sat down across from him, hope flickering in my chest that maybe he wanted to share something meaningful with me, something that might bridge the growing gap between us. Instead, he held up his phone with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Okay, so you know how you're always asking what TikTok is? I thought it would be funny to show you some of these old people trying to go viral. It's like so cringeworthy, but also hilarious." He swiped through several videos providing commentary that grew increasingly cruel. "Look at this lady trying to do the renegade dance. She's probably like your age, Grandma. Isn't that embarrassing?" Each video felt like a small slap. Older adults attempting to connect with younger family members through dance, cooking demonstrations gone wrong, grandparents trying to understand internet trends and failing spectacularly. Tyler's laughter grew louder with each clip. And I realized he wasn't sharing these videos with me out of affection or even curiosity about whether I'd find them funny. He was using me as an audience for his mockery of people who looked just like me. This one's the best, though, Tyler continued, apparently oblivious to my growing discomfort. This grandma tries to explain TikTok to her followers, but she doesn't even know how to hold the phone right. The comments are savage. Someone wrote, "Stick to knitting, Granny," and it got like 1,000 likes. I watched this woman, probably in her early 70s, earnestly trying to connect with an audience that seemed determined to ridicule her efforts. Her hands shook slightly as she held the phone, and I could see the vulnerability in her eyes as she attempted to navigate technology that was clearly foreign to her. The comments Tyler showed me were indeed savage, filled with laughing emojis and ageist jokes that made my stomach turn. "Tyler," I said quietly, "why do you think this is funny?" He looked up from his phone, seemingly startled by the question. "Because it is. Like, why are old people even trying to do TikTok? It's not for them. They should stick to, like, Facebook or whatever." And what exactly makes TikTok not for people my age? He stared at me as if the answer should be obvious. Because you guys don't understand it. You didn't grow up with technology. It's like watching someone try to speak a language they don't know. It's just awkward. I felt something shift inside me then. A combination of hurt and determination that I hadn't experienced since Harold's death. So because I'm 73, I'm automatically too old to learn something new? Too old to try connecting with younger people through their preferred medium? Tyler shrugged, already losing interest in the conversation. I mean, yeah, it would be weird if you had TikTok, Grandma. Like, really weird. None of my friends' grandparents are on there, and honestly, it would be embarrassing if mine was. The word embarrassing hung in the air between us like a challenge. I looked at this young man I'd loved unconditionally since the day he was born, who was now telling me that my very existence in his digital world would be a source of shame for him. The dismissal in his voice, the casual cruelty of writing off an entire generation as incompetent and irrelevant, ignited something in me that had been dormant for too long. "I see," I said calmly. "And what if I were to get TikTok? What if I were to prove that this old lady could learn your language?" Tyler actually laughed out loud at this suggestion. "Grandma, no offense, but you still ask me to help you change the input on your TV. You think you could figure out TikTok? The algorithm, the trending sounds, the editing. It's like really complicated. Try me." The confidence in my voice seemed to surprise both of us. Tyler looked at me with raised eyebrows, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "Are you being serious right now?" "Completely serious. You seem to think being 73 automatically disqualifies me from understanding modern technology. I'd like to prove you wrong." Tyler set down his phone and actually gave me his full attention for the first time since he'd arrived. "Okay, but like, what would you even post about? Your knitting? Your garden? No offense, but that's not exactly viral content, Grandma." I thought about Harold's workshop in the garage, still exactly as he'd left it 3 years ago. I thought about the 60 years of life experience I'd accumulated, the skills I'd learned, the challenges I'd overcome that Tyler knew nothing about. I thought about the assumptions people made about women my age, about what we were capable of and what we had to offer. "Let me worry about the content," I said. "Your job is just to help me get started. Show me how to download the app and set up an account." Tyler seemed torn between amusement and genuine curiosity. "And happens if you actually get it working, like if you manage to post something?" I smiled, feeling more energized than I had in months. "Then maybe you'll realize your grandmother isn't as hopeless as you thought." He was quiet for a moment, studying my face as if trying to determine whether I was serious or just trying to make a point. Finally, he shrugged again. "Fine. But don't blame me when you get roasted in the comments. The internet isn't exactly kind to, older creators. I think I can handle myself, Tyler." He pulled out his phone with the resigned air of someone indulging a stubborn child. "Okay, first you need to download the app. Do you want me to do it for you or do you want to try?" I want to learn everything myself. Just guide me through it. For the next hour, Tyler walked me through the basics of TikTok with the patience of someone teaching a toddler to tie their shoes. He showed me how to scroll through videos, how to like and comment, how to follow other accounts. His tone was condescending throughout, peppered with phrases like, "No, not like that," and "See, this is why it's confusing for older people." When we got to the part about creating content, his skepticism reached new heights. So you hold the phone like this, vertically, not horizontally, like you're taking a picture, and you have to make sure the lighting is good, and you need to think about your background. And honestly, Grandma, the editing alone is probably going to be too much for you. I listened to every instruction, asked clarifying questions, and made him repeat things until I was confident I understood. Tyler's impatience grew with each question, but he'd committed to helping me and seemed determined to see it through, if only to prove his point about my inevitable failure. "What should my username be?" I asked, poised to type on the account creation screen. Tyler thought for a moment. "I don't know. Something that makes it clear you're a grandmother, I guess. Like Grandma Rose 73 or something boring like that." I typed for a moment and then showed him the screen. "How about wisdom at 70? He made a face. "That's like super cheesy, Grandma, but whatever. It's your account." After he left that afternoon, I spent hours scrolling through TikTok, studying the platform like I was preparing for a final exam. I watched cooking videos, dance challenges, life hacks, comedy skits, and educational content. I paid attention to how successful creators structured their videos, how they engaged with their audience, what kinds of content performed well.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
What struck me most was the hunger for authenticity I saw in the comments. Young people responded enthusiastically to creators who were genuine, who shared real experiences and practical knowledge. They craved connection with people who had lived full lives, even if they didn't always know how to ask for it respectfully. I also noticed that while there were plenty of older creators being mocked, there were others who were beloved by audiences of all ages. Grandmothers teaching traditional recipes, grandfathers sharing woodworking tips, older adults offering life advice with humor and wisdom. The key seemed to be confidence, authenticity, and the ability to offer something valuable rather than simply trying to copy trends designed for teenagers. That evening, I called Rebecca to tell her about Tyler's visit and my new TikTok account. My daughter's response was predictably concerned. "Mom, are you sure this is a good idea? Tyler told me what happened, and honestly, I'm worried about you putting yourself out there like that. The internet can be really cruel, especially to older women. Maybe this is Tyler's way of apologizing for being rude, but you don't have to prove anything to him." "This isn't about proving anything to Tyler," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. "This is about refusing to be written off as irrelevant just because I've lived longer than most of the people on that platform." Rebecca sighed. "I just don't want you to get hurt, Mom. These young people can be really mean in their comments. They don't have the same respect for elders that we were taught to have." "Then maybe it's time someone taught them." I spent the rest of the week preparing for my first video. I cleaned Harold's workshop until it gleamed, organized his tools, and practiced explaining various woodworking techniques to an imaginary audience. Harold had been a master craftsman, and I'd spent 47 years of marriage learning from him, helping with projects and developing my own skills with his patient guidance. I decided my first video would be simple but impressive, restoring an old wooden jewelry box I'd found at a garage sale last weekend. It was the perfect project to showcase skills that might surprise people who assumed elderly women only knew how to bake cookies and tend gardens. On Friday morning, I set up my phone using the tripod Tyler had reluctantly helped me order online, adjusted the lighting according to the tips I'd learned from watching other creators, and began recording my first TikTok video. "Hello, everyone," I began, looking directly into the camera with the confidence I'd spent a lifetime developing. "I'm Rose. I'm 73 years old, and my grandson thinks I'm too old to understand TikTok. Today, I'm going to show you something I learned from my late husband, Harold, over our 47 years together. I held up the damaged jewelry box, pointing out the scratches, loose hinges, and faded finish. This little treasure was heading for the trash can when I rescued it from a garage sale last weekend, but I see potential where others see problems. Let me show you how to bring something beautiful back to life. The video took me several attempts to get right. I kept stopping and starting, forgetting to explain certain steps or fumbling with the phone. But finally, I had a version I was satisfied with. It showed the complete restoration process in fast forward, with clear explanations of each technique, and ended with the jewelry box looking brand new. Before I could lose my nerve, I posted a video with the caption, "When your grandson says you're too old for TikTok, but you've got 73 years of wisdom to share. Who else thinks age is just a number?" Then, I put my phone away and spent the day trying not to think about it. I tended my garden, made myself lunch, and even took a nap to calm my nerves. It wasn't until evening that I finally checked to see if anyone had watched my debut effort. The numbers on my screen made me think there was some kind of error. The video had been viewed over 50,000 times. The likes were climbing steadily toward 5,000, and the comments section was exploding with activity. I scrolled through the comments with trembling hands, expecting the harsh ridicule Tyler had warned me about. Instead, I found message after message of encouragement and admiration. "This is so satisfying to watch. Your skills are incredible. Grandma Rose is cooler than I'll ever be. That restoration was perfect. I wish my grandmother would teach me stuff like this. You're amazing. Age is definitely just a number. This is inspiring. Can you please be my honorary grandma? I need someone to teach me these skills." There were negative comments too, of course. People calling me cringe and suggesting I stick to knitting, just as Tyler had predicted. But they were vastly outnumbered by viewers who seemed genuinely impressed by what I had accomplished and hungry for more content like it. The most surprising comments came from young people Tyler's age, expressing genuine admiration for skills they wished they possessed. Many shared stories about grandparents who had tried to teach them similar crafts, but had been dismissed as old-fashioned. Some expressed regret about not paying attention when older family members had tried to share their knowledge. One comment particularly touched me. "My grandpa tried to teach me woodworking before he passed, but I was always too busy with my phone. I would give anything to have those lessons back. Thank you for sharing your skills with us." I fell asleep that night with my phone still buzzing with notifications, feeling more energized and purposeful than I had since Harold's death. For the first time in years, I had a project that excited me, an audience that valued what I had to offer, and a platform where my age was becoming an asset rather than a liability. Tyler didn't call or text that weekend, which wasn't unusual, but I found myself wondering what he would think when he discovered that his embarrassing grandmother had attracted more attention in one day than he had managed to accumulate in months of posting selfies and gaming videos. I decided not to tell him about the video's success just yet. Instead, I would let him discover it naturally, the way I'd discovered his dismissive attitude toward everything I represented. Sometimes the most powerful lessons were the ones people learned by accident, when they weren't expecting to have their assumptions challenged. My second video went up on Monday morning. This time, I tackled refinishing an antique rocking chair, sharing stories about Harold and our early years of marriage while I worked. The response was even stronger than before, with viewers commenting not just on my craftsmanship, but on the love and history woven throughout the narrative. By Wednesday, my follower count had reached 10,000. By Friday, it was 25,000. Comments poured in from people of all ages, sharing their own stories about grandparents, asking for advice on restoration projects, and expressing gratitude for what they called real content from someone with real experience. I was starting to understand the addictive nature of social media that Tyler had always displayed.
Each notification brought a small hit of validation. Each kind comment felt like a personal connection, and the growing number of followers represented a community I was building from scratch.
But more than the numbers, I was energized by the sense of purpose this platform was giving me. For 3 years, I'd felt like my knowledge and skills were becoming irrelevant, that the world was moving too fast for someone like me to contribute meaningfully. TikTok was showing me that there was actually a hunger for the wisdom that came with age, for the patience and craftsmanship that my generation had learned out of necessity. I started planning more ambitious projects, thinking about the stories I wanted to tell and the skills I wanted to share. Harold's workshop was coming alive again, filled with purpose and creativity instead of just memories and dust. It was exactly 1 week after my first video went live that Tyler finally discovered what his embarrassing grandmother had been up to. Tyler burst through my front door the following Tuesday morning without knocking, his face flushed with what looked like a mixture of disbelief and panic. I was in the kitchen brewing my morning tea when I heard his footsteps thundering across my hardwood floors, followed by his voice calling out in a tone I hadn't heard from him in years. "Grandma Rose, what the hell did you do?" I set down my teacup with deliberate calm, the way Harold used to do when he was preparing to deliver news that wouldn't be well received. Tyler appeared in my kitchen doorway, his phone clutched in both hands like evidence in a criminal trial, his usually perfectly styled hair disheveled as if he'd been running his fingers through it repeatedly. "Good morning to you too, Tyler. Would you like some breakfast?" "Don't good morning me," he said, his voice cracking slightly with the strain of whatever had brought him to my house in such a state. "My friends are blowing up my phone asking if you're really my grandmother. Apparently you're some kind of TikTok sensation now. What is happening?" I poured myself another cup of tea and settled into my usual spot at the kitchen table, the same place where Tyler used to sit when he was small and tell me about his day at school. Back then, he'd hang on my every word and beg for stories about the old days. Now, he stood before me like I somehow betrayed him by existing successfully in his digital world. "I took your advice," I said simply. "You suggested I tried TikTok, so I did." Tyler's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak again. "I didn't suggest you try TikTok. I was showing you why people our age, people your age, shouldn't be on TikTok. It was supposed to be funny, not inspiration for you to actually do it." "People my age," I repeated, savoring the slip he'd made. "How old are you again, Tyler?" His face reddened. "You know what I mean. I meant old people. Senior citizens. Whatever. The point is, you weren't supposed to actually get on there and start posting videos." I opened the TikTok app on my phone and showed him my follower count, which had grown to 38,000 overnight. And why exactly wasn't I supposed to do this? Tyler stared at the numbers on my screen as if they were written in a foreign language. "This has to be some kind of mistake, or maybe people are following you to make fun of you. That happens sometimes with older creators. They get ironic followers." Take a look at the comments on my latest video and tell me if you think people are making fun of me. With obvious reluctance, Tyler took my phone and began scrolling through the comment section of my morning restoration video, which had focused on bringing new life to a vintage sewing machine I'd found at an estate sale. I watched his expression change as he read message after message of genuine appreciation and admiration. "This is actually really cool. Can you teach us more advanced techniques?" "I'm 19 and I've been trying to learn woodworking for months. Your explanations are better than any YouTube tutorial I've found." "My grandmother passed away last year and I miss her story so much. Thank you for sharing yours with us." "You're proving that age brings wisdom, not limitations. Keep inspiring us." Tyler's frown deepened with each comment he read. "I don't understand this. These people actually think you're cool?" "Is that so hard to believe?" He looked up from the phone, his expression genuinely confused. "But you're my grandmother. You make me help you figure out your TV remote. You ask me to explain slang words. How are you suddenly some kind of influencer?" I took a sip of tea, considering how to explain something to my grandson that he should have understood instinctively if he'd been paying attention to me as a person, rather than dismissing me as an outdated inconvenience. "Tyler, The fact that I need help with modern technology doesn't mean I don't have valuable knowledge and skills to share. I've been learning and creating things since before your parents were born. But this is different. This is my world. Social media is supposed to be for young people. The possessiveness in his voice revealed more than he probably intended. This wasn't just about his surprise at my success on TikTok. This was about his sense of ownership over the digital spaces where he'd been able to exist without having to consider the perspectives or contributions of older generations. Your world, I repeated.
And what exactly makes it exclusively yours? Tyler shifted uncomfortably, clearly struggling to articulate feelings he'd never had to examine before. It's just weird, okay? Having my grandmother on the same app where I post stuff. What if my friends see your videos and connect them to me? Would that embarrass you? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications Tyler wasn't ready to confront. He fidgeted with his phone, avoiding my eyes. It's not that I'm embarrassed of you. It's just, this is supposed to be my thing, young people's thing. And now you're getting more likes than me? There it was. The real issue wasn't my age or my supposed incompetence with technology. It was the fact that I was succeeding in a space where he'd expected me to fail. And worse, I was succeeding better than he was. How many followers do you have, Tyler? His jaw tightened. That's not the point. How many? Like 800. But I don't post that often and my content is different. It's not the same thing. I nodded thoughtfully. You're right. Your content is different. You post videos of yourself playing video games, making faces at the camera, and complaining about school. I post videos teaching people skills they can use for the rest of their lives. Tyler's face flushed darker. So now you think you're better than me. I think I understand something you haven't learned yet. People don't follow you just because you're young. They follow you because you have something valuable to offer them. And what's that supposed to mean? I stood up and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the garden Harold and I had planted together 40 years ago. The roses were in full bloom, the result of decades of careful tending, patient learning, and accumulated wisdom about what each variety needed to thrive. It means that being young isn't a skill, Tyler. It's not an accomplishment. It's just a temporary condition that everyone experiences and everyone grows out of. But knowledge, craftsmanship, and the ability to create something beautiful with your hands, those are skills that become more valuable with time, not less valuable. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, less combative. So you're saying I don't have anything valuable to offer? I stood up and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the garden Harold and I had planted together 40 years ago. The roses were in full bloom, the result of decades of careful tending, patient learning, and accumulated wisdom about what each variety needed to thrive. It means that being young isn't a skill, Tyler. It's not an accomplishment. It's just a temporary condition that everyone experiences and everyone grows out of. But knowledge, craftsmanship, and the ability to create something beautiful with your hands, those are skills that become more valuable with time, not less valuable. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, less combative. So you're saying I don't have anything valuable to offer? I stood up and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the garden Harold and I had planted together 40 years ago. The roses were in full bloom, the result of decades of careful tending, patient learning, and accumulated wisdom about what each variety needed to thrive. It means that being young isn't a skill, Tyler. It's not an accomplishment. It's just a temporary condition that everyone experiences and everyone grows out of. But knowledge, craftsmanship, and the ability to create something beautiful with your hands, those are skills that become more valuable with time, not less valuable. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, less combative. So, you're saying I don't have anything valuable to offer? I'm saying you haven't figured out yet what your valuable contribution is. And as long as you believe that your age automatically makes you more interesting or important than people who've lived longer, you'll never develop the skills and wisdom that actually attract people. The conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing with notifications. Tyler glanced at the screen and his eyes widened. You have 50 new comments just from the last 5 minutes. I picked up the phone and scrolled through the messages. Requests for more restoration tutorials, questions about specific techniques, people sharing photos of their own projects inspired by my videos. One comment made me pause. My teenage son showed me your videos and said I should learn from you instead of buying everything new. This is the first time he's ever expressed interest in learning something practical from an adult. Thank you for building bridges between generations. I showed the comment to Tyler, watching his face as he read it. This person's son is probably your age. What do you think made him respond differently to my content than you did? Tyler read the comment twice before answering. I guess he wasn't expecting you to fail. What do you mean? When I first saw you trying to understand TikTok, I was waiting for you to mess up so I could feel superior about knowing something you didn't know. This kid probably watched your videos without knowing you personally, so he just saw the cool stuff you were making. It was the most insightful thing Tyler had said during our entire conversation, and I felt a flicker of hope that maybe this experience could become a learning opportunity rather than just a source of conflict between us. Tyler, do you remember when you were 12 and you wanted to learn guitar? He nodded, looking confused by the change of subject. You practiced every day for months.
Your fingers bled from pressing the strings. You got frustrated when chords didn't sound right, but you kept trying because you wanted to create music. What made you think I wouldn't have that same determination to learn something I wanted to master? Tyler was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. I guess I stopped thinking of you as someone who learns new things. I started thinking of you as just old. The honesty in his admission was both painful and promising. And what does old mean to you? Like stuck, unable to change or grow or understand new things, just finished learning. I sat back down at the table across from him. Tyler, I learned to use power tools when I was 65 because Harold's arthritis made it hard for him to do detail work. I learned to manage our investments when I was 68 because I realized I needed to understand our finances better. I learned to use a smartphone when I was 70 because I wanted to stay connected with family. Learning doesn't stop just because you reach a certain birthday. Tyler looked up at me with something that might have been respect flickering in his eyes. I never knew you learned all that stuff. You never told me. You never asked. And when I tried to share stories about things I was working on or learning, you always seemed bored or impatient. Because I thought it was just old people stuff that didn't matter. And now? Tyler glanced at my phone again, where notifications continued to pop up steadily. Now I'm wondering what else I don't know about you. The admission felt like progress, but I could sense his internal struggle wasn't resolved. He was caught between his growing recognition of my capabilities and his discomfort with having his assumptions challenged so publicly. Grandma Rose, can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you tell me you were getting so successful on TikTok? I had to find out from my friends. It was embarrassing. I considered my answer carefully. Because when you came here last week, you made it very clear that you thought my presence on TikTok would embarrass you. You said it would be weird if your grandmother was on the same platform as your friends, so I decided to let you discover it naturally. Tyler winced. I said that? You did, along with several other things that suggested you viewed me as incompetent and irrelevant. I didn't mean... Tyler, here's what I want you to understand. The way you talked to me last week,
The assumptions you made about what I could and couldn't do, the casual dismissal of my potential to contribute something meaningful to your generation, that hurt me more than I let you see." His face crumpled slightly. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I really didn't mean to hurt your feelings." "I know you didn't mean to, but that's part of the problem. You weren't even considering the possibility that your words could hurt me because you weren't thinking of me as a full person with feelings and capabilities and dreams." Tyler stared at the table, processing this. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you were thinking of me as just your old grandmother who needs help with technology and makes good cookies. You weren't thinking of me as Rose, a woman who spent 47 years building a life and learning skills and accumulating wisdom that might actually be valuable to people." The conversation was interrupted by Tyler's phone buzzing insistently. He glanced at it and groaned. "It's my mom. She's probably calling about your TikTok thing." "Answer it!" Tyler reluctantly accepted the call and put it on speaker. Rebecca's voice filled my kitchen, tight with the kind of worry that had characterized her personality since childhood. "Tyler, are you at your grandmother's house? I just got off the phone with your Aunt Linda and she's telling me Mom has gone viral on TikTok? What is happening over there?" Tyler looked at me helplessly.
Grandma Rose is like TikTok famous now. It's really weird. Famous for what? Tyler, please tell me your grandmother isn't doing something embarrassing online. I reached for the phone. "Hello, Rebecca." "Mom, what is this about you being on TikTok? Linda said you have thousands of followers and you're posting videos of yourself doing woodworking. That doesn't sound safe at your age." The phrase "at your age" triggered the same frustrated response I've been feeling all week. "Rebecca, I've been doing woodworking safely for over 40 years. Age hasn't suddenly made me incapable of using tools I've been using since before you were born." "But Mom, what if you get hurt? And what if people online are mean to you? Tyler told me he tried to warn you that the internet can be cruel to older people." I looked at Tyler, who had the grace to appear ashamed of his previous warnings about getting roasted in the comments. "The internet has been overwhelmingly kind to me, Rebecca. People are appreciating the skills I'm sharing and the stories I'm telling. I'm getting requests for tutorials and messages from young people who want to learn traditional crafts." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "But why, Mom? Why put yourself out there like this? You have a perfectly nice, quiet life. Why risk having strangers judge you?" The question revealed so much about how my own family viewed my life. A perfectly nice, quiet life. As if contentment should be my only goal at 73. As if I should be satisfied with existing peacefully in the margins while younger people claimed center stage. Because I have knowledge and skills that die with me if I don't share them, Rebecca. Because there's a whole generation of young people who want to learn things their parents and grandparents could teach them if only someone would take the time to do it patiently and clearly. "But you could teach Tyler those things. You don't need to teach strangers." Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Actually, Mom, I never really wanted to learn that stuff before. I thought it was boring." "See?" Rebecca's voice carried a note of vindication. "Tyler isn't interested in woodworking, so who exactly are you trying to reach?" I walked back to my phone and scrolled to one of the comments from that morning's video. A 19-year-old college student who's been trying to learn furniture restoration to pay for school. A single mother who wants to refinish her grandmother's hope chest for her daughter. A retired veteran who's looking for a new hobby that uses his hands. Should I go on? Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "I just worry that you're setting yourself up for disappointment, Mom. What happens when the novelty wears off and people stop watching your videos? Then I'll have spent several months sharing knowledge I'm passionate about with people who appreciated it. That hardly sounds like a failure to me." Tyler had been listening to this conversation with growing discomfort and finally spoke up. "Mom, you should see some of the comments on Grandma's videos. People really love what she's doing. It's not just some weird internet trend." I was surprised by Tyler's defense of my work, small as it was.
It suggested that despite his initial shock and resistance, he was beginning to process the situation differently. Tyler, you were the one who told me this was a bad idea. You said she'd get made fun of. I was wrong, okay? I was wrong about a lot of things. Tyler looked at me as he said this, and I saw something in his expression I hadn't seen since he was much younger. Respect, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. After Rebecca hung up, promising to call back later when she'd had time to process this development, Tyler and I sat in my kitchen in a silence that felt different from the uncomfortable tension we'd grown used to over the past few years. Grandma Rose, Tyler said, "Can I ask you to show me how to make one of those restoration videos? Not for TikTok or anything, just I want to understand what you're doing." The request surprised me more than his earlier admission of being wrong. You want to learn woodworking? I want to understand why all these people think what you're doing is so cool. And maybe I want to learn something from you that doesn't involve me explaining technology to you for once. I smiled, feeling something shift between us that had been broken for longer than I'd realized. I'd love to teach you, Tyler. But I have one condition.
What's that? You have to promise to be patient with yourself. Learning new skills takes time, and you're going to make mistakes. The same way I made mistakes when I was learning TikTok. Tyler nodded solemnly. I promise. And Grandma, I'm sorry for being such a jerk about the TikTok thing. You're actually really good at it. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. As Tyler and I made plans for his first woodworking lesson, my phone continued buzzing with notifications. Comments, new followers, messages from other creators wanting to collaborate. The digital world that had seemed so foreign and intimidating just 2 weeks ago was becoming a source of connection and purpose I hadn't expected. But more importantly, it was becoming a bridge back to my grandson, who was finally beginning to see me as something more than just an outdated obstacle to his modern life. The revolution wasn't just happening online. It was happening right here in my kitchen, one conversation at a time. 3 weeks later, I was sanding the final coat on an antique secretary desk when Tyler arrived for what had become our regular Tuesday afternoon woodworking session. He'd been coming faithfully every week since our kitchen confrontation, and I'd watched him transform from a skeptical teenager humoring his grandmother into a genuinely engaged student who asked thoughtful questions and took pride in his developing skills. "Grandma Rose, you're not going to believe what happened at school today," he said, setting down his backpack and pulling on the work apron I'd bought him. His excitement was infectious, the kind of enthusiasm I remembered from his childhood but hadn't seen in years. "Tell me while you work on that jewelry box," I said, nodding toward his current project. Tyler had chosen to restore a small wooden jewelry box similar to the one in my very first TikTok video. But he was taking his time with each step, learning to appreciate the patience that quality craftsmanship required. Tyler picked up his sandpaper and began working on the jewelry box lid with careful, even strokes. "So, you know how I never really talk to anyone about what you're doing on TikTok? Well, today in chemistry class, this girl Madison was showing people some TikTok about furniture restoration, and it was one of yours." I looked up from my sanding, curious about where this story was heading. "What did you do?" At first, I was going to pretend I didn't know you, because that's what I always do when someone mentions you online. But then Madison started talking about how much she admires you and how she wishes her grandmother was as cool as you and how she's been trying to find someone to teach her woodworking for months. Tyler paused in his sanding, looking at me with an expression I was still getting used to seeing from him. Pride, mixed with something that looked like amazement. "So? I told her you're my grandmother." "And? How did that go?" Tyler grinned, the kind of genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "She freaked out," in a good way. She asked if I could get your autograph, and when I told her I actually work on projects with you every week, she said I was the luckiest person she knows. I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun streaming through Harold's workshop windows. Madison sounds like a smart girl. She is, and she asked if maybe sometime she could come learn with us. I told her I'd ask you, but I was pretty sure you'd say yes because you're always talking about wanting to share these skills with young people. I set down my sandpaper and looked at Tyler, this young man who, just a month ago, had been embarrassed by the thought of his friends knowing I existed in his digital world. You'd be comfortable having one of your classmates here, learning alongside you? Tyler considered this seriously, which was another change I'd noticed in him over the past few weeks. He'd started thinking before speaking, weighing his words instead of just reacting with whatever emotion hit him first. Yeah, I would. Actually, I think it would be cool. Madison's really interested in learning, and I've gotten pretty good at some of the basic techniques. Maybe I could help teach her while you supervise. The idea of Tyler as a teacher, passing on skills he'd learned from me, felt like completing a circle I hadn't even realized we'd started. I'd love to have Madison join us. Why don't you invite her for next Tuesday? Tyler's smile got even wider. Really? That's awesome. She's going to be so excited. As we worked together in comfortable companionship, Tyler chatting about school and friends while we focused on our respective projects, I reflected on how much had changed since that devastating morning when he'd burst into my kitchen demanding to know what I'd done to embarrass him. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. There had been awkward conversations, moments of backsliding into old patterns, times when Tyler's friends made jokes that clearly bothered him more than he wanted to admit. But gradually, something fundamental had shifted in how he saw me and how he saw himself in relation to me. My TikTok account had continued growing steadily, reaching over 200,000 followers by the end of the month. The content had evolved beyond simple restoration videos to include storytelling, life advice, collaborations with other creators, and responses to the hundreds of questions people ask in the comments. But more importantly, it had become a vehicle for something I hadn't expected. Intergenerational connection on a scale I'd never imagined possible. Young people shared photos of projects they'd completed using my techniques. Older adults thanked me for inspiring them to try new things. Parents wrote about how my videos had given them activities to do with their children, skills to teach that didn't involve screens or consumption. The most meaningful messages came from people describing how my content had changed their relationships with older family members. Stories about grandchildren who had asked grandparents to teach them forgotten skills. Adult children who had apologized for dismissing their parents' knowledge, families who had found new ways to connect across generational divides. Tyler had shown me some of these comments, and I could see how they affected him. Each story seemed to make him more aware of how he'd been interacting with me and more intentional about building a genuine relationship rather than just tolerating my presence in his digital world. Grandma Rose, can I tell you something kind of embarrassing? Of course. He focused intently on his sanding as he spoke, as if the physical activity made the confession easier. I used to think being young was like the most important thing about me.
The right message at the right time can just explode. And your message about intergenerational wisdom and the value of traditional skills apparently hit people exactly when they needed to hear it. Over the next several hours, Tyler and I watched in real time as my small woodworking TikTok account became the center of a cultural conversation I'd never intended to start. News outlets were calling me a senior citizen sensation and an unlikely social media influencer. Think pieces appeared about ageism in digital spaces, the importance of preserving traditional crafts, and the hunger young people felt for authentic connection with older generations. But the most moving content came from ordinary people sharing their own stories of family reconnection. A college student who called her grandfather to ask about his military service. A teenager who asked her grandmother to teach her to cook traditional recipes. Adult children who apologized to their parents for dismissing their knowledge and experience. Tyler showed me post after post of families working together on projects, learning from each other across generational lines, building connections that had been neglected or broken. The hashtag #wisdom@70 had been used over 50,000 times in a single day, each use representing someone who had been inspired to value older adults differently than they had before. "Grandma Rose," Tyler said, looking up from his phone with an expression I'd never seen on his face before, "do you realize what you've done?" "I posted some videos about woodworking," Tyler shook his head. "No, you've changed how people think about age, about what older people have to contribute, about what families can be when they actually listen to each other." He showed me a video that had been posted just hours earlier, a young woman about his age working alongside her grandfather to restore an old rocking chair, both of them laughing as they struggled with a particularly stubborn piece of hardware. The caption read, "My grandfather has been trying to teach me his hobby for years, but I always said I was too busy. Thank you, #wisdom@70, for helping me realize what I was missing. This is the best day I've had in months." I felt tears pricking at my eyes as I watched the video. This is what I'd hoped for when I'd first decided to challenge Tyler's assumptions about my capabilities, but I'd never imagined it could reach so many people or have such a profound impact. "Tyler," I said, "do you remember what you asked me the first day you showed me those cruel TikTok videos?" He looked confused for a moment, then his face cleared. "I asked you what you would even post about." "And what did I tell you?" Tyler smiled, the kind of smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "You said you'd worry about the content, and my job was just to help you get started. And what do you think of my content now?" Tyler set down his phone and walked over to where I was sitting, wrapping me in the kind of spontaneous hug he hadn't given me since he was much younger. "I think you figured out something I didn't even know I was looking for," he said quietly. "A way for young people and older people to actually connect instead of just tolerating each other." As the sun began to set through the workshop windows, casting long shadows across the projects we'd been working on together, Tyler and I sat in comfortable silence, processing the day's extraordinary developments. My phone continued buzzing with interview requests, collaboration offers, and messages from people whose lives had been touched by the simple act of an elderly woman refusing to be dismissed as irrelevant. But the most meaningful transformation was happening right there, in Harold's workshop, between a grandmother and grandson who had found their way back to each other through the patient work of hands and hearts, proving that the most revolutionary act of all might just be the radical decision to see each other as fully human, regardless of age. The next morning brought a call from a major television network offering me my own show about intergenerational skill sharing. Publishers wanted to discuss book deals about modern grandparenting and bridging generational divides. Craft companies wanted partnerships and endorsements. Tyler helped me navigate these opportunities with a wisdom that surprised me, helping me distinguish between offers that aligned with my values and those that simply wanted to capitalize on my sudden fame. He'd become my unofficial manager and biggest advocate, proud to tell anyone who would listen that the woman inspiring millions of people to reconnect with their families was his grandmother. But the most meaningful outcome wasn't the media attention or commercial opportunities. It was the quiet revolution happening in families around the world, as people who had written each other off as too young or too old began to discover the wisdom and wonder that existed across generational lines. Madison joined our Tuesday workshop sessions and brought 2 other friends who were eager to learn. Tyler became a patient teacher, passing on the skills I'd taught him with the same care Harold had once shown me. My small workshop became a gathering place for young people hungry for authentic connection and practical knowledge. 6 months later, as I watched Tyler carefully guide Madison through the process of hand sanding a delicate inlay, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't proving that a 73-year-old woman could master social media. It was proving that age was never a barrier to growth, connection, or the radical act of refusing to let others define your worth based on the number of years you'd been alive. The revolution had started with a single video and a grandmother who refused to be dismissed. But it had grown into something far more powerful, a movement of people choosing to see past age-based assumptions and discover the full humanity in each other, one conversation, one project, one patient lesson at a time. 1 year later, I stood in the green room of the Today Show, adjusting the wooden pendant necklace Tyler had made me for a Christmas gift. It was my third major television appearance this month, following interviews about my new book, Never Too Late, Building Bridges Across Generations, and the documentary crew that had been following my story for the past 6 months. The makeup artist, a young woman named Sarah who couldn't have been much older than Tyler, applied a final touch of powder while chatting about her own grandmother. She started painting again after watching your interview last spring. She's 82 and just had her first art show at the community center. She keeps telling everyone it was you who inspired her to stop making excuses about being too old to try new things. These stories had become commonplace over the past year. Everywhere I went, people approached me with tales of how my simple decision to learn TikTok had rippled outward into their own lives, inspiring them to challenge their assumptions about age, capability, and the arbitrary limitations society placed on different generations. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler, who was watching from home because he had a calculus exam that afternoon. "You've got this, Grandma Rose. Can't wait to hear how it goes. P.S. Madison and I finished the dining table yesterday. Photos attached." The images he'd sent showed a beautiful cherrywood dining table, crafted entirely by Tyler and Madison, working together in what had become our expanded workshop. They'd started dating 6 months ago, bonded initially over their shared love of woodworking and their mutual admiration for what Tyler now called Grandma Rose's revolution. The dining table was destined for Madison's family home, a wedding gift for her older sister. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler, who had once mocked the idea of older people trying to connect with younger generations, was now creating heirloom furniture designed to bring families together around shared meals and conversations. "Miss Stevens?" a production assistant appeared at my elbow. "We're ready for you on set." As I walked toward the studio lights, I thought about Harold and wondered what he would have made of this extraordinary year. He'd always believed in the power of patient teaching, of sharing knowledge across generations, of finding ways to connect through the work of our hands. I like to think he would have been proud, not just of the fame or the book deals, but of the bridges being built every day between grandparents and grandchildren who had been strangers to each other. The interview went smoothly, covering familiar ground about my journey from TikTok novice to viral sensation to inadvertent spokesperson for intergenerational understanding. But toward the end, the host asked a question that caught me off guard. "Rose, you've talked a lot about how this experience changed your relationship with your grandson Tyler, but how has it changed you? Who were you before all this began, and who are you now?"
That was what made me interesting or special or whatever. Being part of the generation that understood technology and social media and all that. I waited, sensing he had more to say. "But watching you on TikTok and learning from you here in the workshop, I realized that being young is actually kind of empty. It's not an accomplishment. It's just something that happened to me. But the stuff you know, the things you can create with your hands, the stories you tell about your life with Grandpa Harold, that's actually impressive." Tyler looked up from his project, meeting my eyes directly. "I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm sorry for thinking your age made you less important than me. That was really stupid." The apology meant more to me than the viral videos, more than the thousands of followers, more than all the external validation I'd received over the past month. This was my grandson recognizing that I was a complete person worthy of his respect and attention, not just a relic from an outdated era. Thank you for saying that, Tyler. It means everything to me. And Grandma, I'm really proud of what you've accomplished.
Not just the TikTok stuff, but everything. The way you learned something completely new, the way you proved everyone wrong about what people your age can do, the way you're teaching all these skills they actually want to learn. It's really cool. We worked in comfortable silence for a while after that, each lost in our own thoughts. Tyler's jewelry box was starting to look beautiful, the wood grain emerging clearly under his careful sanding, the proportions elegant and pleasing. He was developing an eye for craftsmanship that couldn't be taught through videos or tutorials, only through hands-on experience with patient guidance. Around 4 o'clock, Tyler's phone started buzzing with notifications. He glanced at it, and his expression changed to one of confusion mixed with concern. "Grandma, are you expecting some kind of media attention? Because I'm getting texts from, everyone I know asking about you." I set down my tools and wiped my hands on my apron. "What kind of texts?" Tyler scrolled through his messages, his frown deepening. "Madison says you're trending on Twitter. My friend Jake sent me a link to some news article about you. My cousin Emma wants to know if you're going to be on TV." Before I could respond, my own phone began ringing. The caller ID showed Rebecca's number, and I could predict from recent experience that this would be either very good news or very concerning news, with little middle ground between the two. "Mom?" Rebecca's voice was breathless with excitement when I answered. "Are you sitting down? 'Cause you need to be sitting down for this." "I'm in the workshop with Tyler. What's going on?" "The Today Show wants to interview you, and Good Morning America, and about 6 other shows I've never heard of. Mom, you're not just TikTok famous anymore. You're actually famous." I looked at Tyler, who was staring at me with wide eyes. "I don't understand. What happened?" Rebecca's words came out in a rush. "Someone shared your TikTok about restoring Grandpa Harold's tool chest, the one where you told the story about your early marriage and how he taught you woodworking. It got picked up by some celebrity social media manager, and then it went mega viral, like millions of views in 12 hours viral." I felt suddenly dizzy and reached for Harold's old work stool to sit down. The video Rebecca was referencing had been particularly personal, filmed on what would have been Harold's 76th birthday. I'd restored his tool chest while sharing memories of our life together, talking about how he'd been patient with my questions and encouraging of my interest in learning his skills. Tyler grabbed my phone and put it on speaker so we could both hear Rebecca's continued explanation. "But Mom, it gets better. That celebrity, the one who shared your video, she wrote this long post about how your story made her call her grandmother for the first time in 2 years. And then other people started sharing their own stories about reconnecting with older family members because of your content." I tried to process what Rebecca was telling me. "And that's why new shows want to interview me?" "That's part of it, but there's more. Apparently, your videos have started this whole movement of young people learning traditional skills from older relatives. There are thousands of posts on Instagram and Twitter with hashtags like Grandma Rose Inspired and Wisdom at 70. People are sharing photos of projects they're doing with their grandparents, skills they're learning, relationships they're rebuilding." Tyler was scrolling frantically through his own social media feeds, his expression shifting from confusion to amazement to something that looked like awe. "Grandma, you should see this. There are hundreds of people posting pictures of themselves in workshops with their grandparents, and they're all tagging your account and talking about how your videos made them realize what they were missing." I took the phone back from Tyler, my hands trembling slightly. "Rebecca, I don't understand how this happens so quickly." "Mom, that's how the internet works sometimes."
I considered the question carefully, thinking about the woman who had arranged flowers in her kitchen while feeling dismissed and invisible, whose primary identity had been widow and occasional babysitter, rather than teacher and creator. "Before this began," I said slowly, "I think I had accepted that my most important contributions were behind me, that my job was to exist quietly on the margins, while younger people lived their full lives in the center of everything that mattered." The host nodded encouragingly. "But this experience taught me that knowledge doesn't expire, just because the person carrying it reaches a certain age. Wisdom doesn't become worthless when it comes from someone who remembers rotary phones and handwritten letters. And the desire to learn, to grow, to contribute something meaningful to the world, that doesn't diminish with age. If anything, it becomes more precious because we understand how limited our time really is. After the interview, I took a taxi to the small cafe where Rebecca had agreed to meet me for lunch. My daughter had flown in from Chicago specifically for this television appearance, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago when she'd viewed my social media presence as a concerning phase rather than a legitimate pursuit. Rebecca was already seated when I arrived, scrolling through her tablet with the same focused intensity she brought to her marketing career. She looked up as I approached, and I saw pride in her expression, rather than the worried concern that had characterized most of our conversations about my TikTok activities. "How did it go?" she asked, standing to hug me. "I think it went well. They're going to air it next Wednesday." We settled into our seats and ordered, falling into the comfortable rhythm of conversation that had developed over the past several months as Rebecca had gradually adjusted to having a famous mother. "Mom, I owe you an apology," Rebecca said suddenly, setting down her coffee cup with the decisive gesture I remembered from her childhood when she was working up the courage to confess some transgression. "What for, sweetheart?" "For not believing in you. For thinking this TikTok thing was some kind of midlife crisis or desperate attempt to stay relevant. For treating you like you were too fragile or incompetent to handle being in the public eye." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, which surprised me. She'd inherited Harold's practical nature and rarely displayed strong emotions in public settings. "I was so focused on protecting you from potential embarrassment that I never stopped to consider you might actually have something valuable to offer that platform. That maybe the reason you were successful wasn't luck or novelty, but because you genuinely had wisdom and skills that people needed." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You were being a good daughter. You were trying to protect me." "But from what? From growing? From challenging myself? From finding new purpose and joy in my life?" Rebecca wiped her eyes with her napkin. "I realize now that I was doing the same thing Tyler was doing, putting you in this box marked elderly grandmother and assuming that box defined your entire identity and all your limitations." Our food arrived, giving us both a moment to collect ourselves before continuing this unexpectedly emotional conversation. "Rebecca, do you remember when you were 12 and wanted to learn photography?" She nodded, looking confused by the apparent change of subject. "You begged your father and me for a camera for months. You checked out every photography book in the library, studied composition and lighting techniques, practiced with our old Polaroid until you'd mastered every setting. I remember you and Dad finally bought me that 35mm camera for Christmas. Do you remember what happened when you showed your first roll of developed film to your art teacher?" Rebecca smiled slightly. "She entered one of my photos in the state youth competition. I won 3rd place. And do you remember what I said to you that day? You said, talent doesn't have an expiration date and passion doesn't recognize age limits. You said if I kept learning and practicing, I could create beautiful things for the rest of my life." I squeezed her hand gently. "So why would those principles stop applying to me just because I turned 70? Rebecca stared at me for a long moment, understanding dawning in her expression. "They wouldn't. They don't. The only difference between 12-year-old you and 73-year-old me is that I have more experience with patience and persistence. I've had more practice at not giving up when something seems difficult or unfamiliar." We ate in thoughtful silence for a while, both processing this conversation and its implications for how we understood each other and ourselves. "Mom,"
Rebecca said eventually. "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course. Do you miss the quiet life, the privacy, not having strangers recognize you in grocery stores or having reporters call the house? Sometimes I worry that all this attention has turned your life upside down in ways that might not be entirely positive." I considered her question seriously, thinking about the dramatic changes of the past year, the constant media requests, the speaking engagements, the flood of messages from followers seeking advice or sharing their stories, the way simple errands now required planning and preparation because people wanted to take photos or ask questions. There are definitely aspects of fame that I didn't anticipate and don't particularly enjoy. The loss of anonymity can be overwhelming sometimes, and the pressure to constantly create content that lives up to people's expectations is more stressful than I expected. Rebecca nodded, looking concerned. "But Rebecca, do you know what I was doing with my life before all this started? I was existing, maintaining, waiting for phone calls from family members, tending a garden that no one else cared about, preserving Harold's memory in an empty house that felt more like a mausoleum than a home." I paused, trying to find words for feelings I was still processing myself.
This year has given me purpose again, not just the TikTok account or the media attention, but the sense that my knowledge and experience matter to people, that I can still contribute something meaningful to the world instead of just taking up space in it. And Tyler, how do you feel about how your relationship with him has changed? I smiled, thinking about our Tuesday workshop sessions, which had grown into a regular gathering of young people eager to learn traditional skills. Tyler and I have a real relationship now, instead of just a biological obligation. He sees me as a complete person, with thoughts and feelings and capabilities, not just as his grandmother who needs help with technology. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, processing this. "I think I need to examine my own relationship with you. Make sure I'm not making the same mistakes Tyler was making." "What do you mean?" "I mean, when was the last time I asked you about your goals or your dreams or what you wanted to accomplish? When have I ever thought of you as someone who might want to grow or change or try new things?" The question hung in the air between us, highlighting patterns of interaction that had become so normalized we'd stopped noticing them. "I love you, Mom, but I think I've been treating you like a fixed entity rather than a person who's still evolving and learning and becoming. That's not fair to either of us." After lunch, Rebecca walked with me through Central Park, continuing our conversation as we strolled past families enjoying the late afternoon sunshine. Children played on playground equipment while their parents and grandparents watched from benches, and I found myself noticing the interactions differently than I would have a year ago. How many of those older adults had stories to tell that their families had never bothered to ask about? How many had skills or knowledge or wisdom that was being overlooked because society had decided their primary value lay in quiet caretaking rather than active contribution? "Mom," Rebecca said, interrupting my thoughts, "I want to propose something." "What's that?" "I want to spend more time with you. Not just duty visits or holiday obligations, but real time where we do things together and I learn from you the way Tyler has been learning." I looked at her with surprise and interest. "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet. What would you want to teach me? What have you always wished we could share together that we never made time for?" I thought about this as we found an empty bench overlooking the pond where people were feeding ducks and flying remote-controlled boats. "I've always wanted to teach you Harold's recipe for his famous chili," I said. "Not just the ingredients, but all the stories that go with it. Where he learned it, how it evolved over the years, why he added certain spices at certain times of year." Rebecca smiled. "I would love to learn that. What else?" "I'd love to show you the photo albums from before you were born. All the pictures of Harold and me traveling, the adventures we had, the people we met. I have 47 years of marriage stories that you've never heard because you always seemed too busy to listen. I want to hear every single one of them.
We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the activity around the pond and planning this new phase of our relationship. "You know what's funny?" Rebecca said eventually. "What's that?" "A year ago, if someone had told me my 73-year-old mother would become a social media influencer and teach me life lessons about not limiting myself based on age, I would have thought they were crazy." I laughed. "A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be sitting in Central Park after a television appearance planning intergenerational cooking lessons with my daughter, I would have thought the same thing." But here we are. Here we are. As the sun began to set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Harold would have insisted we stop to admire, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought me to this moment. Not just the fame or the book deals or the television appearances, but the relationships that had been transformed, the assumptions that had been challenged, the bridges that had been built between people who had forgotten how to see each other clearly. Tyler texted me a photo from that evening's workshop session, where he was teaching a group of 6 teenagers how to properly use a hand plane. In the background, I could see Madison working with 2 other young women on a quilting project we'd recently added to our curriculum. The caption read, "Wisdom at 70 keeps expanding. Thanks for showing us that learning never stops and teaching never ends." But perhaps the most meaningful message came from a stranger, someone who had been following my content since the early days and had been inspired to rebuild her relationship with her own grandmother before it was too late. "Dear Rose," the message began, "my grandmother passed away peacefully last week, surrounded by family who had learned to see her not as a burden or obligation, but as a teacher and storyteller and keeper of family history. The last 6 months of her life were filled with conversations and shared projects and mutual respect that wouldn't have happened without your example. Thank you for showing us that it's never too late to choose love over assumptions, connection over dismissal, and wisdom over youth worship. You gave us back our matriarch before we lost her forever." Reading that message on the train back home, I understood that the real revolution had never been about social media metrics or viral videos or television appearances. It had been about the radical act of refusing to be invisible, of demanding to be seen as fully human regardless of age, and of insisting that every generation has something valuable to offer if we're just willing to listen with respect and patience. The movement that started with a dismissed grandmother and a dismissive grandson had grown into something that was changing families across the world, one conversation, one project, one bridge at a time. And tomorrow, in workshops and kitchens and living rooms everywhere, the quiet revolution would continue as people chose connection over separation, wisdom over prejudice, and love over the arbitrary limitations that had divided us for so long.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.